In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the night day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. And this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. In the beginning, the earth was a formless void, chaos, and the Spirit of God hovered over the dark waters. Creation emerges from darkness and chaos. It emerges especially when we are willing to hover with the Spirit of God over the dark waters and the void. It's an ongoing process. The traditional doctrine of the Church asserts that God created ex nihilo, which means from nothing. But Genesis affirms otherwise. Creation begins with chaos and with darkness, with lack of definition. They are the essential building blocks to bring life into being. Chaos, darkness, lack of definition. It's a powerful creative dynamic. And I have experienced it several times with Dennis. The first time was 10 years ago, when I took a group from Crow's Nest Uniting Church to Cromer with Dennis. The land behind Cromer, where he led us, is pleasant enough. At first glance, it's ordinary Australian bush, without much definition. Grey-green in its dressings. And if I am entirely honest, I find it slightly unsettling. Dennis then took us onto a sandstone outcrop. I've seen so many like it before, or at least I thought I had. But then Dennis took out a bottle of water and poured it on the rock, and suddenly ancient carvings became visible. There was definition. They came to life. They were created, as Dennis told us stories about them. There was also sadness because some of the stories have been lost, gone forever. But here was light, definition, culture, story, a new awareness emerging from outside anything in our Western cultural and religious tradition. I saw something I had not seen before. It was an act of creation. The second time I went was last year with many of you, with Dennis. Notice his hair's a bit greyer 10 years later. We went to the same place. I was very happy to return, if I'm entirely honest. I thought it was a good thing to share with you because I already knew about it, because I had been there before. I knew this creation, or so I thought. But this time Dennis shared new stories. Those of you who went, do you remember the necklace? And it had such incredible complexity and different layers of meaning to it. I'd seen it before, but the stories this time were a new act of creation. The Spirit was sweeping over this place again, bringing forth light and life. And then out of nowhere, so to speak, and you can see that in the slide, there were some friends of Dennis, and they had a small baby. And we enacted spontaneously on that spot. Dennis offered an Indigenous blessing and then invited me to offer a Christian blessing. And water was poured on a little crack in the rock, which Dennis told me was the river of life. Creation, new life. We were enacting it on that very spot, that sacred place. We urban dwellers are by and large out of touch with the land. But the Spirit of God is still hovering over the void and chaos, bringing forth light and life. And we hear it from our Indigenous friends, like Dennis. Thanks be to God. I would now like to invite Dennis to speak to us. And our theme that I've asked all our guests to speak on in this Interfaith month is, what is it in your tradition and religion that encourages you to welcome the other, the outsider?
Some of you may be interested or wondering why
That's a clicker for your...
Oh, wonderful, thank you. Some may be interested why I'm wearing this today. When you're in the army, you get a series of stripes on your arm, and then one day you get a pip on your shoulder. This designates that I've reached that, not the officer and the gentleman stage, but I've reached an age and a level of knowledge that now the old women tell me I've got to wear my possum skin. So every time I do anything publicly now, I wear the possum skin as a sign of respect for this country. It's made from bushtails, and you'll notice they're all black, which is the Lane Cove black possum. So it's very special for me. Michael has set me a task, which is a thesis in itself. In fact, there's probably several theses in there. What is Indigenous spirituality and the concept of welcome to outsiders? And I'm actually going to give a little bit of history of why we weren't very welcoming to the First Fleet, and then hopefully you can understand that, and how we're members, why we welcomed other people from outside of our clan. Spirituality, and the writing there is a bit small, I hope, but you can see that one fairly well. Spirituality really is holistic, and one of the reasons why Christianity is absorbed by Aboriginal people very quickly, and has been absorbed very quickly, and why we've taken to Christianity very quickly, while still believing in our own beliefs, is the concept of Genesis is so true to ourselves, of beauty and happiness that's actually come from chaos. And Aboriginal spirituality is all about the very identity, what makes us. It's about everything. It's about all the objects. It's about the trees, the animals. And this comes down to the concepts of where we have Buna, or our totems, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we believe that we are actually bound to the animals, the flora and the fauna around us, because our biology is actually connected to them. And that's what's the wonderful thing about spirituality. It's all-encompassing. So the concept of loving the land and being a part of the land and being as one with the land has very deep meanings. And that's really what spirituality is about. It's also about our ceremonial processes. It's about the opportunity to bless a child. And I don't think I've mentioned to you before, but we started up a women's site a few years ago, and we had several women who were told that they no longer could go through the IVF process. They were barren, they would never have a child. And one young girl was told this, and I think she was the age of about 34, 35, and she was totally shattered. So we took her up there. The first year we took her up there, nothing happened. The second year we took her up there, she fell pregnant within a short period of time. It was a normal pregnancy, and I was worried that there would be a spirit would come through that child that would be so angry because it's been pent up in the Angophora, which we've talked about many times, and I'll talk about again today. And I was worried that the spirit of this child, which has come from heaven, would be so angry because it's been pent up in this tree for probably 150 years plus. And as it turned out, it was a very placid and beautiful baby. That same young lady has since gone back to the tree again to thank it, and guess what happened? She fell pregnant again. So 2 miracle babies. And so the concept of spirituality is all-encompassing, and it's about belief, and it's about belief in the country. But I've tried to give a very quick explanation there in English to sort of cover it. But Aboriginal spirituality is also totemic. And those of us that are going to go to North Head today, which we call Carangal, and I'll explain that when we get there, and it's not a hard walk, it's a very flat walk. It's around Lady Fairfax area, the Lady Fairfax lookout area. That's where we're walking. It's about totemic. You don't have to go to Central Australia to go to a totemic site. Sydney is full of totemic sites, and North Head is a totemic site. And the concept of totemic, it makes up who we are. My skin group is raven, and that's my totem. Totem being a European word. Our word is buna, which means our skin. I'm the raven, I'm of a raven, and we do believe in reincarnation. That's a part of our beliefs, and it's my belief that I will come back as a raven, or I hopefully may be reborn as a child. If I don't get born as a child first up, I'll come back as a raven, and then hopefully be reborn as a child after that. So our process of spirituality is ongoing, and this is another strength of how we're connected to the country. But the totemic beliefs is very, very strong, and it's not an anthropological concept of the 19th and 20th centuries and 21st centuries. It's very deep, and it's only just now being understood by non-Indigenous anthropologists. But it's very strong. And where we're going is a totemic site, and I'll tell you all about it when we get there. So I'll leave you a little bit in hope. But this is what it is, and hopefully that's a button, and no, I won't press it. But you can see at the top of, or at the bottom of North Head, in the bottom right-hand corner, that's the tail. On the right-hand side, where roughly the sewerage works are, that's a wing. On the bottom left-hand side, where the what do they call that station? The quarantine station is. That's the left wing, and there's a little bit of country sticking out near the wharf of the quarantine station. That's actually the left foot. And then up the top, now if you know Manly well, you know that North Head was once separated from the mainland, and the sandbar where the Corso is, that is actually all fill. And if you take that away, you'll find the rock ledge at the top. You can see the top beak, and you can see the bottom beak where Little Manly is and where the gasworks used to be. That is a pelican, somewhat squashed, but that is a pelican. That is a totemic belief, and that's why it's called Carangal. Karang means pelican, and gal means land. It's pelican land. And I'll tell you some of the stories about it when we're up the top there. But that is a totemic belief. That is spirituality at its best. It's also our equivalent to a cathedral. This is the most important monolith and sacred site in the eastern seaboard of Australia. It outweighs anything else on the eastern seaboard. The only thing that's probably more sacred to it would be Uluru, or Ezrock, as some people would call it. But Carangal is definitely the most sacred site on the eastern seaboard. And I'll talk about songlines that emanate from it, and those songlines have been the purpose of this year's NAIDOC week. So that's a little bit about that. So why weren't we friendly? when we do a welcome to country in the old days, it was a big ceremony, and it was a very engaging and very physical ceremony. And this is just some young boys up at and men up at where are they, Burulula, that are doing a ceremony. You can see it's a paint-up job. It's get involved. The women at the back right-hand side, the women are always involved, particularly in this country because it is a matriarchal country, matrilineal country, and the women are always involved because they have the choice of whether to say this person comes in or doesn't. So the degree of welcome is sort of driven by the women. So it is a very physical, it's very active because you want to put on a good show. It's a happy ceremony, and sorry I can't see this, but I'll just give you, I've said it so many times, Gumada Bienga, Gumada Warangra, Maramrong Tianagainaga, Maramrong Bayalia, Gai-marigal Gordon-Pymble or Gai-marigal Gordon-Pymble. And what I've just said, I've asked the male spirits and the female spirits to allow us to walk and talk in this country and recognising it as the traditional country, the Gai-marigal, which is a sub-clan of the Gai-marigal. Now, when we do a welcome to country, it is always in the plural. It is not in the individual. So even in the basis of our language, it's always in the plural. So it is a welcome totally. You know, the very important part of giving Aboriginal people back their place in society. It's an opportunity to say who we are, and that's just a little quote there. The whole concept of ceremonial is about tradition, and it's about ensuring that it's continued. And that prayer from Ray Minikong is a classic. You know, old brother Ray, he's from Queensland. He runs a fantastic group there at Redfern in very trying conditions, and yet he still sees positivity. And that's what our welcome ceremony is. It's being positive, and it's being in. So why weren't we very friendly to the First Fleet? If you can imagine where we're going to stand today, at the top of Carangal, top of North Head, we're going to look down, and if you can imagine when the First Fleet came in, the First Fleet were these big canoes in our concepts. They were big canoes with trees on them, and you had all these hairy fellas running up and down. Now, a lot of those boats in the First Fleet were not British. There was only a few boats that actually were the British Navy. The rest of them were actually outside of the Navy. Now, you had these, and I tried to find a picture of a sailor of the 17th and 18th century, and the chap on the left is probably the best image I could find. They were an ugly-looking sight. They were hairy. They were unkept. They were not a very nice-looking person. And because of their diet, they were relatively small. British records, naval records show that they averaged between 4'9" and 5'3". Now, the gentleman on the right-hand side is what we now call the hobbit, from Indonesia, that was found only a few years ago, of Flores. That's the name they've given to him, Homo florus. Now, Homo florus is a part of our living culture. We call them the little hairy man. They existed 17,000 years ago. That's a drop in the ocean for our stories. So here we have a little hairy man in our oral history, which is real and vivid. In 1788, we have these canoes with these trees on them, and you've got these hairy people running up and down. Florus was also skilled with the talents of running up and down trees very quickly, and they liked the taste of human flesh. So were we going to welcome these guys into Sydney Harbour? No way, because we thought they were inhabited by what we now call the hobbit or the Florus. That's one of the reasons why we stood back and we didn't welcome the new visitors. And also things changed dramatically when we got up and close to this fella, Captain Phillip. Now, Phillip had one tooth missing in the front tooth. We have a ceremony called Yusei, and Yusei is when the front tooth gets knocked out, and that means you've gone through all your training, you're elder enough to take on several wives, and you are seen as a fully initiated man in the clan. Phillip had that. Now, at first we thought he was a ghost because he was so pale, and then when we saw that the tooth was knocked out, we welcomed him. But by then it was too late because our hospitality was repaid with capture. Several men were captured, some were taken back to England. There was the abuse of the women, there was stealing of our cloaks, which were valuable for us, particularly in winter. There was the total loss of fish. Within the first 6 months, our people were starving because the British had already caught most of the fish in the harbour. There was a loss of game. and there was the introduction of rum, of course, and this lower picture, and I'm glad you can't see it very well, that's the image of smallpox. Horrible. So spirituality, and our welcome to the outsiders, it brought spirituality and bringing in the welcome brought us potential networks. It strengthened our social capital, and it gave us access to new food resources or natural herbs for medicine, and it gave us possible new treaties and to also other clans for us to marry into, because we had a limited gene pool. How we understood that, I don't know, but we knew we had a limited gene pool, and we knew we had to marry into other families. We couldn't intermarry within our own. And it gave us obviously military opportunities over other clans if we were linked to the stronger clans around the country. No different to trade agreements today. So, spirituality, the welcoming of other people in our country, this is what it was all about. It was all about these networks, it was these links, and the building of social capital and also strong marriages, which gave us the military connections. I can't emphasise that enough. And along came the British, and what did? Wrecked it. 100,000 years of knowledge, and that was gone within a short period of time. Our people have a lot of stories about wars, about equivalent to the 100-year War of Europe. We have a lot of those wars, but when we had these connections, when we had this welcoming process, it got rid of those. And that's probably what Michael was after, I think, from me, this concept of how we welcome. And to this day, Aboriginal people, look, we could sit back and we could have this thing, Paul Blackfellow me. Some people do, but the majority of us don't. We welcome non-Indigenous people in our country because we know that we're so few. Who is going to look after this land in 100,000 years' time? It's going to be non-Indigenous people. So that's why it's so important to welcome people in. Understand the word waramai, of welcome. And we don't have a word to say goodbye. We have yenu. Yenu is a word that actually means, I'll see you later. We don't ever say goodbye. We don't have that in our language. So it gives you an idea that we have the strong sound of waramai, which is welcome, but we don't have a word that says goodbye. And I think that's it. Yep, it is. So on that note, thank you. But before I go, I just want to draw your attention to the marvellous, and I forgot the lady's name, sorry? Rosemary. Rosemary's work on the left. Yeah, Rosemary did a beautiful one on wattle, and then after I talked about the Angophora tree, she's done this beautiful wall piece on the Angophora. But I just want to read the, and I'll have to yell out, I'm afraid, the little plaque that was done on the side. Excuse me. Oh, you're going to give it, are you? Thank you. And it's actually an Angophora where that sacred site is, the site where we've got the young girls for the fertility. This panel acknowledges that we stand on sacred ground, the land of the Gai-marigal. It also represents the magnificence of the Angophora tree, which thrives in bushland and the surrounding area, and its importance in the spirituality and maintenance of the culture of the Gai-marigal, and importance that is mutually shared in reconciliation. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Our words for that is Gai-marigal. But what a beautiful thing that you've done. Thank you. I'm sure that the spirits of the old people will be looking down, thanking you. The Angophora is the equivalent to us of the church. The Angophora is where the spirit from heaven comes to earth and where the spirit of the deceased departs. So it's both our ceremonial place for receiving life, and it's also our ceremonial place for the departure of life, for the spirit of life, not the body. The body is just a thing that wears out, but it's that spirit, that concept of spirit, which hopefully you've gained a little bit more about after today. Thank you. Gai-marigal. Thank you. Thanks.